Mansplaining Feminism. The idea is that I explain feminism to my good friend Billy, who says he knows nothing. We will go through feminist texts from the 19th century until yesterday. I have studied feminism myself, and that makes me more than qualified to explain everything about it to everyone. Perhaps it is a little arrogant for me to assume this, but then again, it wouldn't be mansplaining if it wasn't. Today's episode, Betty Friedan and the Feminine Mystique, Liberation of the Housewife. Hi Billy, welcome to episode 4.
Thank you, it's great to be back.
You see,
amongst friends and family.
Fantastic. Have you been looking at the world differently since Simone de Beauvoir?
I feel like you gave me new glasses and a new lens to see the world, and then you burned those glasses and tore them to shreds, and then you put them back into the fire, into the embers, into the flames, and out came this new pair of glasses, which I can no longer see out.
Okay, amazing. I'm about to reshape those glasses once more here on episode 4, which is about Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique.
Freedom!
Okay, Feminine Mystique. Simone de Beauvoir was all about freedom. Do you remember that? Transcendence and immanence.
I do.
Yeah, so now Betty Friedan's here. Basically, Betty Friedan is American and Simone de Beauvoir was French, as you remember. And when the Americans do something, it means a lot more.
Okay.
Like in everything else. You know, when aliens land in America, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
When they land in like Paris, it's like a little cutaway scene.
No one cares.
No one cares. It's the Eiffel Tower gets blown up. Who cares? No one's there anyway. So that's the same.
So Betty Friedan is from America?
Yeah, United States of yes.
USA,
exactly. So
and now the series is really started.
It takes
everything that came before was just footnotes to
this moment. And basically, the main difference I would say with Betty Friedan, actually no, Simone de Beauvoir was quite famous, but Betty Friedan, her book is sold a lot. It was discussed a lot. Like everyone was like talking about it. It was massive. So I guess that's a huge difference between her and the other ones before. Like I said, Americans bought it, and that's when things matter the most. So she was a socialist, and she was active in the 40s and 50s, and she was basically an activist. And she came from a Jewish family, second generation immigrant. I think mom and dad were from Russia or Hungary or somewhere along those lines. She was very active in what will come back a little bit during this sort of 70s era, which is called NOW, an organization called National Organization of Women now. And she died in 2006. So basically this book, published in early 60s, is sold very well, like I said. And I'll start actually with the critique. So they got a lot of critique from many different angles, because even though it was sold as this woman's liberation book, it was focused very much on middle-class white women. And everyone outside of that sort of weren't really relevant to it. But that's just.
So what kind of problems did they face?
So the first chapter talks about what she calls the problem that has no name. And this problem that has no name is something she says, Betty Friedan says, it's written a lot. So you remember Simone de Beauvoir, I said it was chunky and it's difficult to read and all sorts of stuff. This one is not difficult to read. So this is written like, normal language.
In a way that I would understand.
In a way that you would understand.
You can just say
This one you could read. And basically she interviews loads of housewives, and she says that having talked to all these women, they all have this problem that has no name. They all have this discontentment in life. There's this alienation that they sense, that they feel in their lives, that everything that they are doing now means nothing compared to the potential that they have. So all these educated people with loads of potential are stuck in these homes, and this sort of context, this situation has created a major problem emotionally, in particular, spiritually, physically, sometimes psychologically, for this massive group of people. And she says this is something that she's noticing. And this particular thing was very, the thing that a lot of people recognized when they bought the book, which is why it blew up and people are like, yeah, I agree. I feel this. The problem that has no name.
But when she says the problem that has no name, she's basically saying that women are pigeonholed into particular lifestyles and particular, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like they have to stay home, decorating the house, cooking, waiting for that. That's all they can do.
So they're socially they're oppressed.
Yeah,
and maybe even legally they're oppressed.
But she doesn't go down that line. So that all that legal stuff. Betty Friedan is more about. She more writes about this thing that even the women themselves sometimes think is wrong. So she interviews a lot of housewives, and she says that a lot of women actually feel like, so the major problem comes from not being happy, but feeling ashamed that they're not happy because they have everything. So they've been sold this idea after World War II, right? And after World War II, all these soldiers come back home. There's this American dream. We're talking about white middle class people in particular, but white people in general as well. A lot of support to buy homes. Suburbia is born, the house. You've seen those posters with the woman coming out with the sort of meatloaf from the oven and the husband's there in a suit. He just came back from work. That whole thing, they've been sold that that's their role in the American dream. So they should be happy because they have a house, they have a garden, they have everything. So why aren't they happy? It's more about this idea that no one really tells them that this is a problem, because everything that's sold to them in magazines and in pictures and advertisement tells them that you should be happy.
And why did she see it as a problem? Did she notice that that women were suffering from particular psychological mental health problems, or did she just see it as objectively a big form of injustice that was perennial to her content?
No, the first thing. So she starts with herself. She says, I'm a housewife, even though I think she exaggerates that in the book because she was quite active outside the home. But she says, I have this feeling that so I asked other people and they said, oh yeah, I recognize that. So she sort of reveals this sort of almost like a secret thing that is revealed in front of everyone in this book in the first chapter. The second chapter starts getting a bit funky because she has a few Nazi examples that a lot of people have problems with. So I think she compares the situation of the housewife to the Jewish people in the concentration camps, which is a bit much.
Was she Jewish?
She was Jewish herself, yeah. Or are you saying she's allowed then?
No, I'm not saying anything, man.
No.
We can get double cancelled.
Cancelled from all sorts of
speak about that. Yeah, cancelled from all angles.
Yeah.
So I was just asking out of curiosity.
Yeah, no, because she interviews a lot of magazine editors as well. And because women's magazines are very popular at this time. And she asked them, so she discusses with them why there's not much politics and, stuff about the outside world in these magazines. And they say, well, women don't care about that stuff. They're not interested in politics or outside world. And this is where it reminds her of the Nazi slogan, children, kitchen, church. The three things that women should think about. And she says this is new. This is not some age-old thing, because in the 1920s and 30s, there are all these literature about heroic women and women doing different things. And she says after World War II, this whole new feminine mystique, which is the name of the book, is this sort of thing that we've created, or that magazines and literature and popular culture has created, this vision of this woman who's supposed to be mystical and supporting the husband with this sort of innocent, childlike sexuality, not really have careers. Their role is to take care, almost mother their husbands who come home after a hard day's work. So that's sort of the...
So what's the name of this book then?
The name of the book is Feminine Mystique, which is the sort of archetype, I guess, that she says has been created since the 40s and has gone really too far, in her opinion, at this point in the 60s. She says this is...
So what does that actually refer to, the feminine mystique?
The sort of vision, the archetype of that woman. You've seen the sort of, the
model housewife.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Don Draper's.
Exactly. Don Draper's wife is literally that, if you've seen Mad Men. So that sort of is the perfect woman. Is supposed to be this never private. And she even says, like, the architecture of the house changed, because in the suburban houses, a lot of these have open plan kitchens, and the privacy of the woman was removed, even the little privacy she had, because when the role in the kitchen, at least that was sort of a private thing, but even that got opened up to the gaze of everyone who came into the house. But she says, so interestingly, she doesn't say, like you mentioned, the sort of oppression of women. She says the schooling, the education of women is really good, because women smash it at school, get really good grades, and they're told to do really well in at school. They're told to exercise when they're at school, when they're young, to keep fit. And so it's like we're pumping up these women to be awesome human beings. And then once they're at ripe age, you go, okay, perfect. Now stand there for 50 years and don't move. So she says that it's almost like we're building them up to be this awesome person with loads of potential, and then we're just binning them in this house.
Right.
Where they can't do anything. That's where that problem is born.
So does she offer a solution, or is this mainly a critique?
It's both. So before she talks about the solution, she says people who have the solution, there's a political move against them. So feminists have been vilified, in her opinion. And she's not just angry with the magazines and popular culture. She doesn't like a lot of the feminists. Some of the feminists, she says, are go a bit too far. She says, the man-hating ones, and the ones who unsex themselves, in her words. She says, you're not fighting men. The ones that are fighting men have misunderstood the whole thing. We're fighting for women's rights. But she does also say that a lot of the sort of vilification of feminists as man-hating is another thing that's happening in the media, which we shouldn't fall for. There starts being a split between radical feminists and, I don't know, conservative feminists or liberal feminists. So there's little splinters that you're going to see now coming out during the second wave.
Are we going to talk about this? Because that's very important for me to.
We're going to get to definitely very, very radical ones. So you'll see a huge difference between different feminists who.
So what kind of feminist is she?
She's the one that says, "Listen, guys, no one really meant." I'm massively vulgarizing, but her thing is, no one really means anything bad by what's happened. But the fact is, this has just gone too far. And she doesn't like this idea that we need to hate men, or the enemies being men or whatever. She basically says the GIs returning from war, there was this feeling of, they've seen these horrible things at war, and they wanted to come home. And in a way, they wanted to sort of go back to their safe childhoods that they had. So this image of the housewives was created, for that effect, for wives to almost have the roles of mothers, to cook and clean the house and all that stuff. And in many ways, the effect of that was housewives actually did a lot more. So the housewives at this time did a lot more work than their moms did, because there was almost constant work. And this, so even the cures for a lot of this is wrong, she says. So that people try to, in these magazines that she mentions one example where there was an article about this housewife fatigue that people suffer. The tiredness of women is suggested, the cures suggested are things like, maybe you should cook things you love. That will make you less fatigued as a housewife, and things like this. She talks about how, because there's no purpose for the housewife, right? There's no point, there's no end in sight. They use all sorts of different self-soothing things, like just suddenly redecorating the house, or sometimes having affairs, and other ways of just getting out of the whole thing. She calls it a comfortable concentration camp later on again.
It sounds a lot like that film.
Which one?
Sorry, go on.
Sounds like which film? With
Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet.
Oh, I haven't seen that. What's that called?
Titanic.
You meant the other one. Is it On the Road or something? The Road something?
I meant the other one.
What's it called?
No, On the Road is the post-apocalyptic. Okay. It's with Kate Winslet. Is in this like a suburban.
And they fall out,
and they
right?
start arguing. they fall out massively. Yeah, because I think he kills her will to live.
Basically, so that's. But often, I don't know if you mentioned Don Draper. You've seen Mad Men. In Mad Men, what's her name? Oh, how embarrassing! I forgot the lady's name.
Betty.
Huh?
Betty.
She goes to see a psychiatrist, right?
Yeah.
And because of that sort of, they think, or people around her think that she's just not, she's just being a woman, or she's being weak, and she doesn't even know why she's feeling like this. It's like, I'm not sure why. And this is Betty Friedan's point, that women need to understand that this is a major issue. It's not some inner thing. You've basically have all this potential and you're stuck in a house. It's not normal.
Is that why she's called Betty?
Is that why she's called Betty? Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
She named after.
Maybe she was.
Here first, everyone.
Maybe she was.
So what's the kind of response? Because I can imagine that women experiencing that would respond to this kind of work very, very positively. So she was very positively.
Huge.
But Leonardo DiCaprio, Don Draper would feel extremely threatened.
I don't know. In a way, that's not the major thing, whether they were threatened or not. It caused a big movement. So the point is, it was a bestseller. People talked about it. It was, people were discussing it, debating it. She became a celebrity. She gave talks in different places, invited to universities, and it was massive. And it started now the National Organization for Women. And in a lot of these talks, she emphasized that we must love our men, our husbands, and our children. This is not some, women must break free stuff. We are in the family, it's all good, but this is the problem. So she argued against the people who she said was trying to splinter the feminist movement and, proselytize lesbianism, start class warfare and all this stuff that she said. So she didn't like those guys that we're going to talk about next. So she was quite, but a lot of people, she also got a lot of critique. So the response was also negative from particularly women of color. So black people, black women, Native American women, working class, poor women, white women were all excluded from this group that she's talking about. And also in the current sort of reading it in 2020, a lot of sort of homophobic language. She calls homosexuality cultural contamination. Yeah.
What's the deal with that? That's I didn't really expect that one. Where did that come from?
Because, like I said, she basically says a lot of these. She tries to differentiate herself from these very aggressive feminists, radical feminists who try to proselytize lesbianism, in her opinion. She's trying to kill off the whole family unit. She's pro-family. Family's good.
Okay.
But
so you wouldn't say that she's a radical feminist?
No, she would smack you in the face if she said that. If she was alive.
What would you say?
I wouldn't say so either. Especially you will agree with me when you get to the other ones. Okay. I mean, she's not, because her point is relatively focused. It's fair. It's very, very sort of fair, right? I don't think anyone can really disagree with what she's saying about the people she's talking about. So the idea that you educate a group of humanity, whether it's a small group, educate them and you make them healthy and fit, and then stick them in a room and say you basically now have no outlet for all of this stuff that you've learned and the things you can do is basically it's trouble, isn't it?
But it just seems that even though you were saying that this is a very white middle class, it's talking about a very white middle class experience. At least it sounds like, even though they're white and middle class, the women that she's speaking to are not academics. They're not university educated, but it still speaks to them in a very real, concrete,
very much so
way.
That's very well put.
And I'm just wondering obviously both of us are in academia in some kind of way. It's very easy to get consumed in a bubble because you see that, okay, the students are affected by this. And then therefore, in your mind, you think, well, the whole world is affected by this. But I guess the question is, at this stage in the history of feminism, to what extent is it just a certain set of educated women that are responding to these issues, or to what extent is this like a broader societal movement in the history so far?
That's a very good question, man. That is far too good a question to ask me. But because I'm an absolute genius, I'm going to answer it.
Yes.
The active people. So all of this 70s second wave feminist movement is tied into the socialist movement very closely. And the socialist movement, as with all socialist movements, were led by educated people. So educated, university educated, but professional people, always
right.
at the sort of spearheading the socialist movements. So in that sense, what this book in particular sparked was a debate. So the debate, it's even the people who were against the book. I know I'm going back to answer to your question a little bit later, but even the people who were against the book. So for example, this idea that housewives should be able to come out of the house. A lot of people said, well, actually, if this feminine mystique thing bubble gets burst and the problem that has no name gets solved, and white women, middle-class women, can come out of the house and go to become journalists and lawyers, who's going to stay and take care of their children? It will be the black maid and nanny.
Right.
So actually, your freedom, you going out of the house, is us going into your house. So it's not really like a full woman's movement. So you're putting some people in.
Right.
So in that sense, but what it did was, because it was a major mainstream debate, in that sense, it did cause a shift in discussion, even like you see today, right? With Black Lives Matter and all the sort of, it's affecting language and culture at a deeper level by the very fact that people are discussing. Whether it's helping people become better or not is a different point that I don't know how to measure. But like Black Lives Matter is doing now, I would say the 70s, starting with this book, did massively affect the way people talked about women and feminism and women's rights and the different roles between men and women. So chew on that for a week, Billy.
Oh, that was an excellent bite-sized morsel of knowledge that you gave me, and I'm going to chew on that for a week.
Love it, man. See you next week.
See you next week. What are we looking at next?
Oh, Billy. What are we looking at next week? We are looking at none other than probably my favorite, Valerie Solanas, who wrote the Scum Manifesto.
Okay. Oh, that sounds sadly all too familiar.
Yeah, it's probably as far away as from Betty Friedan as you can get. So you'll like that one.
Okay. The Scum Manifesto.
See you in a bit.
Fantastic.